On July 15, 1982, in the cold heart of central Siberia, nestled between mountains and dense forests, there was a massive gas processing center made up of pipelines stretching for dozens of kilometers.
That day, everything was running normally.
Workers were checking the gauges, engineers were monitoring the screens, and the sky above them was perfectly clear. Then suddenly, the sound changed. The first thing they heard was a loud whistle, not like the usual gas hiss. Seconds later, a massive explosion rocked the ground, shattering windows in rooms, doors flying off their hinges, and flames shooting out from the pipelines like a nuclear bomb. Workers started running in every direction, one trying to extinguish the fire, another attempting to close the valves, and a third just standing there, unable to process what was happening. Everything was collapsing faster than they could handle it. And in that moment, as people below struggled with the chaos, up in orbit, an American satellite was watching the scene calmly.
It didn't intervene or send a warning. It just observed and recorded everything that was unfolding.
What made the satellite monitor the event was that the explosion wasn't an ordinary accident. This wasn't an ordinary accident. A small virus they injected into the pipeline pressure control system, causing it to ramp up to levels the pipes couldn't withstand. The result was the largest industrial explosion Siberia had ever seen at that time. This moment was the one that changed the shape of the old world, because it announced the birth of a new front in the Cold War, the Internet front. What happened was a strong slap in the face of the superpower of the world at that time, the Soviet Union, which realized that if it stayed like this, it would end. That's why it decided to recruit young hackers in a remote place in West Germany. A group of Soviet youths saw them as the solution, and they themselves would ignite a full digital espionage war between the two greatest powers in the world years later. A war that started with some games on computers and ended because of 75 cents. But the end was that one of the hackers got killed by an unknown party because he knew more than he should. The tale of the Soviet intelligence hackers, the first internet spies in history. What's the story? This is the tale of the Soviet intelligence hackers, the first internet spies in history. They would set things to ignite and ultimately got killed. After the end of World War II and the end of Hitler's era, the world had two giants controlling the planet, each watching the other and suspicious of the other's intentions.
The first giant was the Soviet Union, the red beast in the East. It was the largest country in the world at that time, stretching from Europe to the end of Asia.
The Soviet Union had a terrifying nuclear army, plenty of ballistic missiles, and inside it, the world's largest intelligence agency, the KGB.
The Soviet Union was ruled by a strict communist system, but there was no press freedom or internet, and everything was monitored within its borders.
The Soviets' main goal was to stop American expansion and proved that the communist system was stronger than any other. But the Soviets had a problem more dangerous than the missiles themselves. Their technology was years behind America, and the economic embargo was choking them to the point that this superpower was literally on the verge of collapse. And the worst part was that desperation like this makes any country ready to do the impossible to preserve its existence. As for the second giant, it was the United States, considered the lord of technology and modern intelligence, with the strongest economy in the world. America at that time had the CIA, which was strongly involved in global espionage operations, especially against the Soviets.
America's main goal was to keep the Soviet Union always 2 steps behind them.
At that time, after Hitler's death and the end of the war, Germany was divided into 2 parts. America, Britain, and France took the western part of Germany, while the Soviet Union took the eastern part, and the country was officially divided in 1949. So we had West Germany, an ally of America, and East Germany, a follower of the Soviet Union.
This division is what made Germany the perfect ground for an espionage war between East and West. And from here, our story begins with the first hacker spies in the internet world.
In 1985, in Hanover, in West Germany, around 10 at night, there was a group of German computer enthusiasts gathered in a well-known restaurant in the area called Spectacle in Sasomi. This group were all hackers, but the upcoming story will revolve largely around 3 people. The first is Karl Koch, a 19-year-old teenager, and we'll call him Koch to avoid confusion with names. I want you to not forget this name in particular. The second is Marcus Hess, a 25-year-old physics student, and we'll call him Hess to avoid confusion. The third is Hans Hubener, 17 years old from Berlin, and we'll call him Hans. These 3 were huge fans of the Chaos Computer Club, a German hacker association that became famous for hacking a bank in a way no one expected. They used this money to fund their site called BTX, which was an old internet service that worked through phone lines. Back to Koch, who was 1,000,000% sure they could do the same trick and hack any bank they wanted, but the rest of the group didn't agree. At the end of the night, the trio decided to form their own hacking group, but it would be private and secret, with no one knowing about it. In the days that followed, the 3 started hacking anything that fell into their hands: German universities, American military facilities, literally anything that came their way. They even hacked the European Organization for Nuclear Research. But here came the disaster, because all the work, all the risks, and all the hacks weren't bringing them a single cent. Hackers risk their lives and files for nothing. A hacker, if hungry, will do anything, even if the devil himself is the buyer.
That's why this had to change and be fixed.
But this meeting was to add a new member to their team named Dirk Otto Barczynski, nicknamed Dob. He was a 25-year-old computer specialist. Dob didn't like the idea of the government monitoring people and controlling everything. He was against monitoring communications and computers and saw himself as part of the Internet freedom movement in West Germany. That's why he decided to join the hackers' operations, because he saw it as a form of rebellion against the government. At that time, West Germany was experiencing a liberal internet revolution against ideas of authoritarianism and control. On the other side, East Germany was the complete opposite. It was the most monitored country in the world, especially in East Berlin. Anyone who talked about freedom or even thought about it would be arrested before the idea spread.
It got to the point where out of every 7 citizens in East Germany, at least 1 was a secret informant.
But the Stasi and Soviet intelligence weren't just monitoring their own people. They were also closely monitoring the West.
With the increasing interest in the emerging hacker world, their worry grew.
This worry peaked when a program planted by the CIA caused a massive explosion in a gas pipeline in Siberia. This explosion wasn't just an accident. It was the first shot fired in a new digital war, a war that doesn't rely on armies, but on computer code. From here, the Soviets realized the game had changed. The internet became a weapon, and whoever doesn't catch up gets finished. This event wasn't just an explosion, It was a red alert that shook Moscow from bottom to top. The sheikh reached directly to the office of Nikolai Tikhonov, one of the heaviest men in the Soviet Union, who later became president and considered himself the guardian of Soviet power against America.
Tikhonov saw what happened not just as sabotage, but as a declaration of electronic war.
Soviet pride couldn't accept being defeated by a computer code. From here, the blood boiled in the men's veins, and he started giving orders that were capable of changing the shape of espionage in the world. He said, "We want a digital army, an army that's invisible and doesn't sleep." With his word, a massive project began inside the KGB, the Soviet intelligence. The project was to build the first electronic warfare units and establish secret schools to graduate digital spies, spies who disguise themselves on the internet just like they do on the streets. This moment was the spark that gave birth to the first real computer spies in the world's history, and they're still going on today. This included establishing a digital defense department inside the KGB's 8th Directorate, and also creating a school specialized in digital spies in the 1st Directorate. The students there weren't just learning programming, they were also training in espionage tactics and relationship-building skills. And at the end of the class, there was a Russian young man named Sergei, and although he didn't know yet while he was learning, he was going to become part of one of the most controversial digital espionage cases the world has seen. We reach the end of 1985 in the Hanover area in West Germany. There was a 30-year-old guy named Peter Karl from Hanover who had just been kicked out of one of the biggest casinos in the city. Peter was sitting on a chair in the street, knowing he was broke and not knowing what to do. Here, he remembered an old friend who always talked to him about something called hacking. This friend was Dob, the hacker the three guys had met, who loved freedom of opinion. Anyway, Peter decided to meet with Gob. Dob didn't explain to him exactly what hacking was. Peter suggested an idea to Dob and his hacker team to make money. He told them he had connections with traders in the East, and they would surely be customers buying secret information from them. Dob saw the offer as interesting, and after thinking a bit, he agreed to talk to the rest of the gang, and everyone agreed right away to Peter's idea. Specifically, in Munich, in West Germany, in the headquarters of the German intelligence, BND, top officials gathered because of the growing fame of the hacker world and the risks they could cause, and the recklessness that was happening from the computer club. The issue was very serious, especially since at that time, ARPANET, which was the first computer network in the world and known as the father of the internet we know today, started from America to the rest of the world. But the problem was that this version of ARPANET allowed anyone with the correct login information to access research systems and military systems connected to the network. This openness, although good at first for cooperation, became a big weakness that hackers didn't leave and started exploiting. Thus, the hacker world in West Germany became a big danger to the state at that time.
One of the senior German intelligence officers was a computer expert who explained to them that they needed to do two things. First, catch the German hackers and put them under surveillance. Second, benefit from them for their intelligence purposes if they could. Big danger.
The bosses liked the talk, and with the help of the German intelligence director, the task of monitoring hackers was assigned to a group of people. They called this operation Project Rob. This project will play a big role in understanding what will happen next. On March 14th, 1986, in Hanover, in West Germany, the hacker gang was gathered in Karl Koch's apartment, drinking forbidden things, and suddenly Peter entered and said he had very important news. He told them, "I found a way for our hacking skills to bring us money, and a lot of money too." It seems Peter had connected with someone in the East and told him that the Soviets had strong problems because of the economic embargo on them, and after the explosion in the gas processing center, the Soviet Union was upside down. This means they were buying everything they could: information about new technology, weapons, and even simple memos. And most importantly, they would pay well.
The gang immediately understood what Peter meant.
He didn't want to sell the information they stole to traders in East Germany. He wanted to sell it directly to the Soviet government itself. This was shocking to all of them, and no one expected it. But since they all needed money, they agreed to Peter's suggestion. And so they wouldn't feel like what they were doing was betrayal, they convinced themselves that this would maintain peace between East and West. Their idea was that if America was technologically advanced and the Soviets were behind, there could be fear and war between the two sides because the balance was disrupted. But if both sides had the same level of technology, they would fear each other and not start a war. Meaning, the hackers were saying, "We're not spies. We're preventing war and maintaining world peace." But there was a big problem. The person Peter connected with told him that for the deal to happen, one of them had to talk directly to Soviet intelligence, which meant one of the hackers had to travel himself from West Germany to East Germany, and this was very dangerous and could end everything before it started. At dawn on June 15th, 1986, Peter got in his car and drove from Hanover to the borders of East Berlin.
He stopped his car at the Heinrich-Heinstrasse checkpoint, which is a checkpoint between East and West Berlin.
Inside the car, Peter Karl didn't want to be there at all, but since it was his idea, the gang insisted he go and talk to the KGB.
The place was depressing, consisting of massive concrete walls next to the checkpoint and the streets full of armed guards.
In the moment, Peter raised his head and looked at one of the guards in the military tower. The barrier for passage opened. He drove the car quietly into the inspection area, and as soon as he stopped, one of the East German border officers ordered him to get out of the car. The officer searched him and asked for his papers, and at the same time, a second officer used a mirror to look under the car. Peter was terrified because he had stolen documents hidden in a floppy disk.
If they found it, it would be a huge disaster from which he wouldn't escape.
While Peter was showing the first soldier his official papers, the second soldier suddenly decided to search inside the car. But luckily for Peter, he didn't find anything suspicious.
So, the soldier signaled to his colleague that everything was fine, and Peter got back in his car, drove, and entered East Berlin. He passed the first obstacle safely, but the second obstacle would be just as difficult. He drove to the area of the Soviet trade mission. This area is known to be full of disguised Soviet intelligence spies.
He entered through the front door naively and asked the receptionist about the person he was supposed to meet, but the receptionist had no idea what he was talking about and left him and walked away.
After a few minutes, a tall man in a formal suit appeared. This man was Sergei, that student who trained in a digital espionage school affiliated with Soviet intelligence. Today, Sergei had grown up and become one of the new experts in Soviet intelligence, specializing in internet and cybersecurity matters. On the other side, in West Germany, the hacker gang was sitting, smoking, and indulging in their forbidden things in Koch's apartment. Everyone was tense and no one was talking.
The time was very late, and everyone was worried.
Suddenly, Peter Karl arrived, and when he entered the apartment, he went into the room, pulled out a thick yellow envelope, and threw it on the table. Inside the envelope was about 20,000 marks, which if calculated today would be $23,000.
The gang went crazy with joy.
Their plan succeeded, and money finally started coming to them as they wanted.
But there was one condition. The last thing in the envelope was a list of requests. But Claus and American Peter that they wanted better information than that, and made them a list of things they should look for during their hacks. This list was a mission and its price. For example, the rare source code, which is the original version of any program, they would buy for 25,000 marks. And one of the missions, for example, compilers, which is the program that turns code into a working program, for 5,000 marks, and so on. In short, the Soviets gave Peter a shopping list, and now the ball was in the hackers' court. They could finally use their skills to make money, and that's exactly what they did. Koch and his gang started their professional hacking work. Their life consisted of stealing information from the West and selling it to the East, and every step they took increased their experience more and more. Koch was the one who understood the game the most among them. He knew that the real danger wasn't just in the secrets they were stealing. The danger was in who these secrets would reach and who might use them against you. In August 1986, in California, inside the United States, there was an astronomer named Clifford Stoll. Stoll was working at Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory, one of the most important and largest scientific research centers in the United States, affiliated with the Department of Energy. Stoll was sitting working in his office when suddenly one of his colleagues entered and said it seemed there was a problem in the lab's accounting program. The story is that the lab at that time charged every researcher for the time they used on the computer, and the bill for the past month had an error. And since the accounting program calculates usage in precise detail, this wasn't a program error. Stoll was surprised by the matter and told his colleague he would look into it. When he started reviewing everything, it appeared normal. There was nothing suspicious, until Stoll reached the last new account registered in the system. There, he started suspecting that the matter wasn't normal. This account was for a strange person. This particular account's computer usage was exactly worth 75 cents, meaning it was the cause of the strange Stoll was looking for. But his account didn't have a valid billing address because every user had to register their name and billing data. But Hunter's account had no address or data, like an unknown person. And this was strange because the lab didn't allow accounts without data. So, literally, something weird had happened with this account, but Stoll assumed it was a prank or a simple mistake and moved on. After monitoring the account for a few days and seeing nothing, he deleted it. But the mystery didn't end there. After a few weeks, a message came from the Naval Research Laboratory in Maryland. The message said that someone from Stoll's lab tried to hack their systems, and the user they were talking about was a big computer scientist, an expert in Unix systems. Unix is an operating system used in universities, scientific labs, military systems, and research centers like Berkeley Lab. Meaning, whoever understood Unix at that time was considered elite among computer programmers. This connection attempt would have been logical, except for one problem. The account owner was in Cambridge, England, not in America. Stoll, who started realizing there was something cooking, went and checked the login records for the account and found they were completely deleted, just like what happened with Hunter's account. The hacker deleted all traces from login and usage records. But he didn't know that the lab had an additional accounting system they made internally, not part of the official system.
This system calculates every minute anyone uses the computer and has an independent log.
The hacker didn't know about it, so he didn't delete his traces from it.
At the same time, on the other side of the Atlantic, Koch and Hess and the rest of the gang were throwing parties and having fun.
They were making a lot of money from espionage, but weren't saving any of it.
They spent this money on drugs, girls, parties. They were living the best days of their lives in their view.
All this while hacking the most secure systems in the West.
But for one of them, things started crossing boundaries.
Koch started drowning in the world of addiction, specifically cocaine and LSD.
LSD is a very strong drug from the hallucinogen category that makes a person see things that aren't there, lose sense of time and reality, and live a hallucination trip lasting long hours.
Meaning, this drug is one of the most dangerous mind-altering drugs that completely change a person's way of thinking.
And although no one knew about this addiction at the time, it would have dire consequences in the future.
Back to Clifford Stoll, who was monitoring the hacker and noting everything he did daily.
But one day, he noticed that the hacker gave himself all permissions. He became an admin with full control over the lab system.
This was the last line for Stoll, and when he saw what was happening, he picked up the phone and called the FBI. But the employees there, who mostly didn't understand what he was saying, got tired of him and dismissed him. Then Stoll called the CIA, and they didn't pay attention either, and the same happened with the National Security Agency, NSA, the Department of Justice, and all other government agencies.
That's why he decided he had to catch the hacker himself, because this way no one would care.
In late 1986, in Hanover, in West Germany, in the middle of the night, Marcus Hess was preparing to search for information he could sell.
His habit was to connect from his home computer to the University of Bremen, and from there, try to sneak into his victims' systems.
But this day was different. The University of Bremen had shut down its networks for Christmas break, so he decided to attack the systems directly from his home connection. And unfortunately for him, one of the places he hacked that night was Berkeley Lab, the only place where someone had been waiting for him for a long time.
On the other side of the planet, Stoll and his colleague were monitoring Hess as he connected to their system, and today they were prepared to expose him.
They made a fake file called SDI, or Strategic Defense Initiative, and filled it with text resembling technical reports and fake numbers to make it seem highly secret and dangerous.
But the important thing about this file was that it was very large and would take a long time for the hacker to download.